My name is Matt Boyd. I just joined the Mesh last month. I live in Chinatown. I do or can do installs, support, project management, communications, process modeling, which is kind of the point of our thing, and then I make a lot of pretty slides and words because my day job is an IT consultant. I work at Ernst & Young. I do kind of a lot of things under IT strategy, operating models, things like that. In my previous roles, I did instructional design. I was a help desk manager for a while and started at a help desk, and I was in the Army many, many years ago. I'm here probably for a lot of the same reason that you guys are. I think equitable access to the internet is kind of a foundation for building a good society and helping to equalize outcomes here. And I think we're doing a great thing. I think I was with John on that one. But so anyway, I'll get moving. So today what I'm going to talk about, I just joined a month ago. I went through the onboarding process. Some of you have been through this as well. Obviously, this is a volunteer-led organization. There's a lot of things. This is not meant to be a criticism of anybody's current processes. I know that a lot of people have put a bunch of work into this. I was talking with Margie and a few others, and I kind of said, I'd really like to just kind of look at how we do everything, and just try to find ways to maybe improve it, maybe improve some of the interactions that we have both with the public and potential people, as well as installers, you know, all those different things. The last thing I want to do is come in and rip everything out or make a bunch of improvements. But let me just talk through this. And again, I mentioned I'm a consultant, so there's too many words, but so just bear with me, right? But I just want to ground us here because every time I've been in conversations, we go in 100 different directions. The purpose that I'm going to do here, and this is going to be kind of a project that I'm going to do probably over the next 6 months or so, is to really map all the sort of member journeys, right? As a member goes through the process of onboarding to getting installed, as well as then just sort of getting support. As we do more of this, I think this could grow and look at other things, but right now I really want to focus on where we interact with people, especially non-technical people. Most of us here probably can figure all this stuff out and we can go find what we need in Slack, but I think for a lot of other people, this might be a little overwhelming. My idea here is to kind of identify where there are pain points or issues or just sort of like places where people get stuck in our core operational processes, both for the members and the volunteers. I'd like to determine ideally feasible and cost-effective improvements that we can do, and then really kind of work on a roadmap or a backlog for things that we can do that are high value and hopefully not too much effort. The scope of this that I want to put it in, right? So right now, for today, I've only got 2 of them, and we might only do 1 if this goes too long. The first one is really when a member clicks join and submits that form, and then to getting us to the point to where someone shows up at their house to do the install. And then I have a sort of separate part for whatever the survey and the install is, and then completing all that and documenting. And then the third piece, which will be in a future one, is kind of how people get support, because there's a lot of different channels that people go through for support. Again, I want to sort of just improve existing tools and platform. There's 1,000 different things we could do that would probably make this better, but they probably cost a lot of money or would require us to just completely redesign how we do things, and that's not my intention. Ideally, we have no additional operational expense, and obviously we want to maintain our members' confidentiality and security. Ideally, right, our outcomes here would be to improve the overall install and support experience, have a clear scheduling experience for members. I think that's a big pain point right now. Reduce a lot of the handoffs and friction points. Hopefully decrease like abandons or no-show installations, at least from the members' perspective or the prospective members. Simplify the install process, and then obviously continue to maintain our decentralized decision-making process. For those of you who are, this is the first time you've heard of this, Brian, I'm sure, can talk about the sort of core values of NYC Mesh. If you've looked at the website, right, one of the core values here is decentralized decision-making. This is not intended to put someone in charge. We don't want an executive director. We don't want the board to make all these decisions. So with that, please stop me, interrupt, tell me if you have good ideas. I promise this isn't going to be too painful. So I know this is hard to see from the back and probably from the front as well, so I'm just going to talk through it, right? However, this is also on Slack. You can take a look at it later. But what I tried to do is map this into sort of three, they're called swim lanes, but right, three sort of areas. One is the member themselves on the bottom. In the middle then is our volunteers or install leads. That could be the people that actually execute the tickets, or it could just be someone showing up at someone's home. And then at the top is some sort of system or automation, be it Slack or GitHub or whatever else. So just to walk everybody through the process, and this is mostly from me looking through a lot of documentation and pinging a lot of random people. So once the member submits their join form, a couple of things happen. For one, GitHub will automate some of the geolocation of the address, and then the ticket gets generated, and generally, I think it's mostly Olivia, will send the first response, and I'll talk about that email in a minute. So then the member is instructed to do a couple of things, but they submit their panoramic photos and they send that back, right? When they do that, OS Ticket reopens the ticket, and then someone has to pick it up, right, and take a look at those. And there's a process in here, and I just sort of noted that as admin. So they process the photos, they check the line of sight, they look for hubs, they upload some stuff to GitHub, and then really they kind of interact here with the member. There could be a couple of different back and forth emails. Those of you who have gone through this like I did, it could be a couple of different questions. But the point is, our intent is to get to the point to where we can say, okay, is an install possible, right? At least one of you in this room has probably been told no. And at that point, it's pretty much, it ends, right? We close the ticket and we move on. If it is possible, then the member receives, even I can't read this, a sort of canned email with an Acuity schedule link. The member will schedule that install. Acuity will create the event. And then there's a couple of things that I'm a little unclear on myself. So a post gets generated in the Slack install team channel, and some of you are part of that, some of you are not. That's a private channel. And then there's also a Google Calendar. I actually don't have access to the Google Calendar. I don't know how to get to it. And I feel like I ping Margie or Olivia about 10 times a day, so I don't want to bother them. At some point, an install team lead will pick it up, and then the member is notified of it. So this is the process for them to sort of join and then get to where they have an appointment. And then what I have on the next one is kind of like where I think that there are pain points, but please interrupt me if you think that I've missed something. So for one, if we start from the bottom left here, I think that there's probably a possibility where we could make this a single step, or at least for some people who are a little bit more tech savvy, right, where they can submit maybe panoramic photos with their join form. I don't know. That's one. Two, I think as they get to the intake forms, there's a lot of manual back and forth in here, and there's really only like one or two people doing this right now. I'm kind of curious what the expected response time or what this might have been in the past. It's generally like a couple of days or a week unless people are on vacation, right? So a member submits their stuff and then they wait for someone to respond. Is that primarily just, there's like one or two people that primarily monitor that plus yourself or?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Olivia generally answers the tickets, and after they send in a panorama photo, it's a couple of days.
Yeah.
And then with Acuity, they can schedule within a week.
Right. Right. Do you know, is the site survey is not always required? That would really only be for larger installs, right?
Yeah, we very rarely do a site survey. Yeah, only for like full building installs.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I've been looking at in some of it, because it mentions a lot about sort of a site survey and then an install, and that's what I was curious if that's actually necessary.
The reason is like it takes 3 hours of your day to do a site survey, and it takes 3.5 hours to do an install. I
agree 100%, yeah. I think unless it's something super complicated or if it's going to be a hub or whatever. But I think the biggest, the biggest gap is probably here in Acuity, right? So members scheduling, if you've gone through this before, it just kind of gives you a grid of dates and times to pick. You pick a time, but it's not really matched up with anyone's availability. And I think that there's a little bit of expectation gap for the users. The email that they get does very specifically say, this is just a request, but I think a lot of people, from looking at old tickets, kind of like, they'll respond and be like, nobody showed up. And what it really is that nobody picked up the ticket. What were you going to say, John? is there only one time they can pick in the grid was the question. Currently, yes. Currently, you can only pick one time. So that, I think, is a problem. Now I'm going to go into something with even more text, I promise. However, yeah, go ahead, please.
I'm still learning, the process and everything. I know there was a situation that came up where there was a ticket that was open, and there were some updates, I guess, to the status, but there was no place to put that status, link it to the original ticket. So that might be something that might.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I can add. I meant to bring a notepad. Yeah, I think that's one too, right? Is where you have duplicate tickets that get generated. Currently, if a member, if they send another email with a different, the ticket system really just goes off of the subject of the email. And that's super common among non-enterprise grade ticketing systems. But that one, it's just an extra step. Someone has to, I did it myself. I sent an email when I first joined, and then someone had to go in and reconnect the ticket. And it put it, and I did it on behalf of somebody else, so then it put it in my name. So it was a little confusing. Anything else in this? Did I miss a step? Any of you that have gone through this, is there anything else that you think? I'm trying to just make it a little bit clearer of what this journey is for us to get through. Okay. So what I tried to put together is kind of the details and then maybe some improvements. Again, the next thing I'd like to do later is kind of map some of these improvements to get some of these overlap. So in the panel requests, I think, right, so we have numerous abandoned install requests. I think it might be 1 in 20 that actually respond to it or that go through with it, right? And there's a lot of detail within the initial communication. So I think the number one improvement, and I actually drafted something here, is a cleaner notification email that sort of explains the installation paths and DIY versus assisted. Perhaps some automated reminders. I know right now the tickets effectively, there's a 1-week reminder, but I don't know how automated that is. And then perhaps even some additional ticket statuses. I haven't looked into the system, but I think that, those are things that perhaps could be helpful. I think we would want to gather some member feedback on the onboarding email itself. Anything else that you guys have seen from when they submit, with that first join form, any other ideas? I know it's riveting. So then in the next part, right, so the users are asked to tell the admin if there's a mesh install in their building. My question is, how would they know? In some cases, their neighbor told them, right? Or there's a sticker, I have a flyer in my building that says, text me and I'll help you figure it out. But perhaps there's something where we could do address verification, right? If they submit their address, I assume Olivia is doing that now, but I don't know if there's any sort of process that helps them with that.
To help them know if there's already an install in the building?
Yeah.
No.
Probably just a lookup. Yeah, and look, I want to talk to him about this too, because he might just be like, it's no big deal, it takes me 10 seconds. Then we just forget about it, whatever. I think the Pano submission to the install possible, so here in the middle, I think that does require some, a decent amount of manual intervention from a small set of volunteers, analyzing photos, pushing the stuff to GitHubs, assigning the tickets. Like I said, it seems like Olivia handles this pretty well now, but I think some of the next steps in the communication could help, as well as perhaps even some additional questions that could be asked in the join form, mostly just to reduce the back and forth that's required, so that, and this is kind of similar in support cases where someone will respond and then it might be a couple of days. Again, we're all volunteers, so it's not like we have an SLA, right? So part of this I think could be helpful is reducing the amount of back and forth that's required, and some of that could simply be just additional questions that we ask. The one I think that is, again, that I mentioned is probably the most important. So the acuity scheduling, right, regardless of what the email says, the interface itself implies that they're selecting an available installation time, right? And as you brought up, they can only select a single date and time, and the member kind of assumes that it's a confirmed date and time. Now, in a lot of cases, somebody picks it up, right? If we have a decent amount of install team volunteers waiting around, they're going to grab that time and someone will be available, or they're going to email them and say, I can't do 3, can you do noon? What about tomorrow? It's probably not that bad. But I think this is probably one of the few areas where we might want to look at an alternative scheduling platform, and I've started this, but I haven't gone too deep into it. Because from the research I've done, Acuity doesn't really have any ability to do time blocks or multiple blocks. Because my thought, I mean, in an ideal world, perhaps it's like select the windows that work for you, right? If you've done this with other, not even like with ISPs, but with anything where you schedule in it, sometimes it could be, okay, I'm available Mondays until 11 and like every weekday. And they could do that, right? And then an installer, when they go to pick it up, like I think that really broadens when they'd be available. And again, it reduces the amount of back and forth required with the member.
Yeah, there's a tool called When to Meet that I used in college that's got like a choose your weekly availability function. And I think it's got an API, so maybe we could just send prospective members there and be like, hey, I'm free noon to 6 on Saturdays, every Saturday. And then, the volunteer can just see that and then, work it out from there. When to Meet's a pretty solid tool for that if we're looking for something.
Okay. I also want to look at Google Workspace because I know that there are some scheduling functions in there, and I know that we have a nonprofit workspace thing there. I don't know how robust it is. And then, of course, the other challenge is probably just the integration between all of those, right? Someone's going to have to do that because I think right now they're not really. My understanding, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the Acuity does kick something into Slack. But beyond that, I'm not sure. I know it doesn't update the ticket. So, opportunity. I think the only challenge is there, right? It's just if there's a cost, right, of alternative platforms, what that would cause, and then integration capabilities. And then the last one is really around installers picking up those installs. So again, the Slack post might not get traction from the installers. Again, I haven't gone too detail in here, but it's not really integrated with anything else. And without windows of the preferred install time, it's kind of related. The other one thing that I was thinking about, because we were having some chat on Slack about this, again, because we're all volunteers, I don't think anyone's going to raise their hand and say, I'm available every day at this time, unless it's someone like yourself, right, where you have a role that's a little bit more permanent. So there could be availability mappings, right, where it's something just more like, this is when I'm generally, like myself, I really can't do anything during the week. My job is super demanding, so unless they want to do an install at 8 p.m., it's just not useful. But Saturdays and Sundays, I'm usually around, right, if I'm not out of town. So it could be something like this where for volunteers, it's sort of like, this is just very similar to the members. I'm broadly available. This is when I'm usually, right? So some people maybe work second shift, and they're like, oh yeah, I'd love to do, I don't know, Monday morning installs or daytime installs. Things like that I think could be helpful without really committing people to it. We don't want to put people on shifts. So anything else you guys can think of here?
I'll just add some history here.
Yeah, for sure.
Like initially, there was a lot of back and forth with installs. Like a ridiculous amount of back and forth. Like I can't do 2 o'clock Thursday, but I could do whatever Saturday. And so I'm just like, this isn't working. We'll just let people pick a time.
Mm-hmm.
And then if that time doesn't work, the installer will figure it out. And that saved so much work doing it that way. And I know looking from the outside, it looks kind of crazy, but it saved us so much work by not giving people an option.
I see what you mean. That's a good. I think that's a downside, right? If you give people all that availability, they may just assume that they're going to kind of get to pick and choose. Okay.
I know this is maybe a little less structured, but might it be good to instead just have just have someone respond in a way of like the person who's the prospective member say like, here are my like generally available dates, and then allow the installers to just get back to them directly rather than like actually scheduling something. We leave the scheduling to an interaction between someone who can read that, and then like say if it doesn't get circled back to in a week, you can like,
Yeah.
like follow
I
back.
think that might have been the previous process, though, yeah?
Yeah, we've got to avoid back and forth. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
I see the value in that. I think the biggest challenge from an experience perspective on their end is unless it's a form that they can fill out, they're going to respond in 100 different ways. This has at least been my experience, certainly working with like commercial clients, is if you don't make it really clear what you need from them and lock it down so they can only pick one thing more or less, you're going to get, you guys deal with data, right? It's just going to be a disaster. And I'm not saying, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it also depends on the velocity of installs, right? Like, I think it's slowed down a little bit over the past couple of months, but at some point you guys were at a pretty decent clip, like 5 to 10 a week.
Yeah, it was five a week last year, and it's about 3 a week this year.
Yeah, which is still a pretty decent amount, because I don't think there's a ton of super active, other than maybe Sean. Almost everybody else kind of picks one up every few weeks. So, okay. Look, these are useful, and my intent here is not to solve all the problems. I'm mostly just trying to get feedback here so I can put something together and start more Slack conversations, which is, where we usually make a lot of the decisions. But I think we can go back and forth about the scheduling piece, because I could see it from both sides. I think what's, and I'll actually just kind of jump ahead. What I did do that I think could be useful is, what I think is important is, at least, again, this is from my experience, the first interaction that you have with someone, right? We're members, not customers for sure, but we do need to think about them sometimes, like if people are not technical or if they aren't necessarily here because of the mission and they're more just interested in sort of like getting affordable internet. It's important that the first interaction goes well. And I kind of looked through the initial install email, and I got some feedback from other people, and it contains all the information that you need to know, but it's kind of hard to follow, and it's a little bit unclear on what's really being asked. I think most of us just figured out, like, oh okay, I got to submit panoramas and then this and this. But I think it's really important, at least from the first perspective, and something as simple as just a little bit better formatted email, I think could set the tone better for future interactions. So what I did, and the link is up in the Slack, is just kind of redo this, and again, it's so hard to see with the screen. But what I've tried to do is really focus on what do I need to do right now, a little bit more direct subject, right, that says you have an action required, and kind of step 1, step 2, step 3, and then sort of a shorter version. I know there's FAQs, but there's a lot of them on the website, of just kind of up front of saying, here's the most important things that people probably want to know, right? Basic information to set their expectations and know who we are. Included in this is like, are you guys an ISP? And it says, and I just quoted right off the website mostly, we're not an ISP, we're a community. A common misconception. I mentioned robust support is available, right? And really like the what does it cost thing, because people want to know that, I think, right? Now, when I asked my landlord, the first thing he asked is like, well, how much does it cost? Right, when I was talking to him about like neighbor, I'm like, well, I'm like, well, it's a little complicated. I'm like, it's donation based. However, and he's like, I don't believe it. It doesn't make any sense to me, right? So like, that's kind of what and then, just sort of moving a few things around with the DIY. But I think something that's a little bit more, and I would love if you guys could take a look at this later, and we'll post this in the meeting channel, and then we'll link to the other Slacks. But I would love to get some feedback on this, because I think that this would be a great way for an improvement right off the bat, that we don't need to, this doesn't really require any changes other than just updating some of the emails. Other questions? I think in the interest of time, we'll come back to the other one next month, but I did get some good feedback here. As far as these other ones that we've covered, I think this covers most of the pain points here. Again, I think it's a pretty good process, right? You guys have already optimized this pretty well. And I think just a couple of incremental improvements could really make this thing click. And ideally, like I said, just kind of reduce the amount of back and forth. I think you said the same thing. I would imagine that 5 years ago, it was just a whole lot of email, right? Or 10 years ago.
We realized that problem pretty early on. We've had Acuity for a very long time. And it's free. We're
Yeah.
using the free option. And yeah, we're very open to improving things.
Great. I'll dig into it. And if anybody wants to help me in this endeavor, I know that this is super exciting stuff, but I'll just flash it up here, right? So again, my next steps here is really to go through the support processes as well as the other ones. Again, map out those improvements and start, gathering feedback from members for other ways that we can make incremental improvements that don't require a ton of investment. If you have other ideas, please post it. We do have a couple of things going in the Mesh Services channel. There's like 170 Mesh channels, and so it's a little overwhelming. So I'm trying to help point us in the right direction. You can reach out to me directly or just bring it up in the upcoming meetings. Anything else?
And one of my obsessions is getting people in the same building to register. And,
Yeah.
We need to figure out systems to do that. I made a suggestion in Slack that when you do an install, you just take a photo of the buzzer so we get the apartment numbers for every building in the install. And that way we can send out postcards to the building.
Yeah, or even someone else on Slack mentioned it's a relatively low-cost option on USPS to just, like a whole block. You can hit every address for like 50 cents a piece or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, there's a cost associated with that, but.
Yeah. The problem with the block, we might only be able to do
Yeah.
a quarter of the buildings in one block.
Right. I do like your idea of snapping the photo though, because then you've got 20 addresses right there.
Yeah.
Can I actually add something to that? Yes. Yeah.
Check 1, 2.
Check 1, 2. Okay. So my just part of my onboarding, I involved a couple other people in my building, and I know that a little bit of friction with it is that with a couple of my neighbors, was that we all paid the same install fee. I was wondering if we thought it might be helpful if we start to see more of these, like, say like a building with like 6 units in it, having like a slightly lower fee for people who sign up together as a way to kind of entice people to get their neighbors in. Just might be another way to kind of increase those.
There's already 3 different things you can pay. You can pay the full one or a subsidized one or a monthly one. Yeah. Olivia and I have fought to keep it that way. I've been thinking of maybe transitioning to just one fee of something like $30 a month, but you have to do that for a year, and then it switches to donation. I know we should always have discussions about how to simplify things and make it easier. But if you make it less for some people and more for some people, it's not really fair. I don't think.
Sure. Yeah, I think maybe it's the optics of it, right? Is that if it was 3 members all coming in at the same time, I think that's the argument. It's one thing if I installed it in my building or if I paid it, whatever, up front, but then 2 more people want to come in, that's sort of separate. I think to your point, it's like 3 people want to come in, does it need to be $970 or whatever?
Right, yeah, I think that...
Especially if it only nedes 1 install.
It was explained to me at the time, which I thought was a great explanation, was that, what the install is really more about, it's not necessarily about covering the cost of the equipment. Maybe it died.
No. Okay. Here we go.
Thank you, sorry for the...
I'm going to add more mics to the improvement list.
So I think that it like perhaps not like, oh, we divide the cost by 3, but having some, maybe like a pricing tier, like, okay, like it's whatever, $300 a person to or $300 per unit to put everything in. But say you get another unit, it can like go down to 150 and then it's flat or something like that. Maybe just as a way, again, to entice people into getting their neighbors. And, but if it makes it too complicated, maybe it's not worth our time. If what's the benefit of maybe getting one or two more members versus, losing that money or increasing operational confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all I had to add.
I think, at least for me personally, I think the fact that there is no commitment is probably a big draw for a lot of people. A lot of people are probably a little bit worried, right? If you're coming at this and you're not like gung ho about like if you're not like super on board with the mission, if you're not like I'm doing this do or die, then for a lot of people I think it's like, man, if I have to sign up for a year and it's not very good, whether it is or not, right?
It would never. We don't have contracts, so
I
it's not
understand,
signing
yeah.
up. It's just you agree to do it for a year.
It's the implication of it, I think, though,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Obviously, we're not going to sue anybody. We're not going to go
If you don't
Comcast.
like it, you just stop paying.
Right. And you still don't get cut off anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You said you've got some more to your presentation, or
Happy to talk about the next one if it's not going to put everybody to sleep.
yeah, give us a summary of your next
Okay.
presentation.
So the other piece that I went through was the same approach for the install completion and documentation. Again, I'll if you want, I'll happily read through this. So let me get my laser pointer here. So I think I double tapped on this one. So once the volunteer accepts the install, the volunteer primarily validates the panorama photos and kind of plans the install out. They may contact the member primarily through OS Ticket to confirm it, to ask additional questions, right? Some back and forth there, primarily through OS Ticket. And then they'll gather, I assume, equipment from the mesh room. At least that's what I do, because I don't have a big stock in my apartment with all 450 square feet. It's a true story. And then I'm curious from those of you who have done installs, do you configure the equipment ahead of time? Because I sure as hell do. Yeah? Yeah. Because the thought of sitting on a roof, like I had an Omni the other day I picked up and I got home and I was beating my head against the wall and it turned out it didn't have power over Ethernet. That was a fun learning moment. So if I had been on a roof and it was this cold out, I probably would have jumped off of it. So the install lead or someone will generate the node number and then they'll go ahead and conduct the install, right? So during the install, if we're following through, they should be providing some documentation, walking the user how to, access their router, what their SSID is, how to get support. And then essentially, if it's successful, we ask them to pay. And if it's not successful, you just sort of take all your toys home. Then this is where I think it's a little bit unclear to me. So we update the ticket and we close it. And then I guess we post an update in the Slack install channel. Honestly, the best source of truth I found on this was a YouTube video from a couple of years ago that talked through what we're supposed to do. I think what was struggled for me coming on as a new installer is I couldn't find kind of a document that said, here's all the things you should do for an installer, right? The nice thing is Olivia he just responded to me and said, oh, yep, do this, do this, do this, do this. But in the interest of keeping him sane, especially at midnight, in Switzerland or wherever he might be, I think perhaps we could document some of that. There is some, like the DIY thing, I had gone through it, so it was a little bit easier for me, but I think there's some of that back end pieces of like which Google Doc do you go into to update and get the links. I think he mostly takes care of this, and as I look at it, I was thinking about, right, I know that Margie mentioned some of this, right? Is Meshroom currently the only location that has equipment? I believe so, except for, I think Sean's got a bunch because he does them 5 a week or whatever. She had mentioned some regional hubs. I think there's some big challenges with that, primarily from renting space or who could provide it. So maybe that's not as necessary. But on the same token, if you live in Queens, it could be a bit of a hike to come down here, especially if you're just picking up for 1 or 2 one or two installs. We've already covered site surveys, so that's not really a big deal. And then as I mentioned, to me, it doesn't feel like there's really a formal follow-on process, and it doesn't have to be that formal, but I didn't even see like a checklist other than when I found this YouTube video. And then you had brought this up in a couple of different threads around follow-ups with the member, right? There's likely a gap there, right? They get an email afterwards that says thanks and thanks for paying, here's how you get support. There could be follow-ups, and I tried to sort of lay out a few of those. If I think about this follow-ups down here, I just want to jump down there, right? So whether it's a defined cadence, if we could automate it, right, where they just get sort of a reminder email. I know that there's like community newsletters, but perhaps it's something that they just automatically get 2 weeks later of like, we hope you're doing well, by the way, here's how to get support. If you have an issue, you can respond to us, because I don't know if anybody has looked at like how many of these get abandoned within their first month. I would be curious. It's a big cost for people to walk away from, but I suspect at least a few of them have, right? They get one rainy day and they're like, screw this, and they're way out on the deep hub. I don't know what kind of service quality checks could be done. I know that I've seen some threads about looking at overall service quality, and I know in UASP we can see a lot of this, but degradation of bandwidth I think is something. I mean, I definitely see some sites that are getting like 20, 30 megabit when it seems like they should be getting better. I think the more volunteers we can get, maybe the more opportunity for maintenance, but that's a challenge, right? Who's going to go up on roofs and repoint LBEs? And then the newsletter itself and some of the social media stuff, I know you were doing a lot of it before. Oh yeah? Okay. I don't know. I'm not big on social media, so I don't know how much traction you get there, or if...
Twitter was really helpful, but now it's gone.
Right. We have some moral objections to...
Yeah, so... And it's so spread out now. You got Threads and Blue Sky and Mastodon and So
I'll just say that it's press that does it. Every time there's something in the press, there's a New York Times story.
That's what brought me here. I read a Times article last year.
Each big increase in installs has been from press.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think some of the follow-ups even could be, right, sort of related to when we started. There's this sort of avalanche of information, and for those of us that are really into this or quite techie, it's like, great, I'm just eating it all up. I went through 100 Slack threads just to kind of see what was going on here, because this really interests me, right? But I think for a lot of people who are kind of just looking for something simple, it may just be a little bit overwhelming. So, perhaps it is just... I like the idea of just a 2-week follow-up, just a reminder, right? Oh, by the way, if your neighbors now that you've had the service for a while and you realize this is legit and, this isn't fly-by-night, like, by the way, if your neighbors want to get on board, we're here to help. As I went up to the top, right, so I think we've kind of talked about install scheduling ad nauseum here. On the volunteer accepting the install, I think there are some trainings that were done before. I think it would just be great to do more of them. I would love to come to one or even lead one and find out more ways to sort of get people involved there. And then I mentioned the availability mapping that could be helpful. Is it sustainable right now because I believe right now they're essentially automatically assigning a lot of these to Sean or Marco, although Marco's mostly handling here, yeah?
Sorry, assigning...
I've noticed a lot of, especially support tickets, just kind of,
support.
It seems like they're just getting assigned to Sean.
Yeah, they get the overflow if no volunteers can do it.
Okay. One question I had, this third one, for new installers, it was a little unclear to me how much gear I should be, if I should just be sort of buying all my own stuff, as a volunteer, or what could be available from the mesh room. I know that there's some inventory sheets, but I've never seen anything. again, as a part of sort of like install team checklist, it could be like, here's the things that are, like obviously I'm not buying my own light beams and Omnitic's, but like cable, right? That can add up pretty quick. You know, the connects, like, I don't think we're gonna give everybody drills, but I think it would be, it could help people or make the onboarding process for an install lead or an install team member a little bit easier or at least less daunting if it's like, do I gotta buy $500 of stuff? I don't know, what do you guys think when you did it?
We help people. So, some people have their own hardware, some
Right.
don't. We have floating drills that go around, and all hardware, cable, crimps, J45s, everything is in the mesh room.
Okay. I was just thinking like a one-pager, right, or a two-pager, or even just something that's on the, like there's a typical install guide in the docs,
Right.
but even something that's just a little bit more like, okay, if you want to be an install person, like here's everything to know. And it was really good in that video, to be honest with you. The video, like, I don't know who did the video, this is 4 or 5 years ago or whatever, but it was like, here's why you should do it, here's the skills that you'll gain, here's what's really awesome about being an installer, and then here's what you need. And I thought it was really good, but I don't love watching 40-minute videos myself. Sometimes I'm just like, just let me read through the checklist, and maybe it's just something like that. I mean, I could take the video and just make a list out of it,
Right.
if people are interested.
There's always 2 times speed on YouTube.
Yeah.
There's always 2 times speed.
Just going to put it through ChatGPT. Tell me what I need for installs. That's going to solve all of our problems, I think, right? For those of you who have done installs, like, what do you do when you complete an install? Is it a consistent process, or is it mostly just everybody pings Olivier and I don't even?
Hey, yeah, so I think we don't really have like a formal process for the installers to do anything, although Olivier, he's on the Slack a lot, and he usually like will go through and check the install is installed and stuff.
Right.
And we've discussed like maybe having a bot or something that does that. It's just a matter of doing it.
Yeah, because I don't even know that it needs to be automated, right? But the reason that I hesitate from suggesting automation or bots for a lot of this stuff is simply because then someone has to write it and then someone has to maintain it.
Yeah, I think
right?
it's like the alternative to that is someone has to do it. So
Right, yeah. I mean, either way, someone has to do something, but even someone backup. Honestly, just in the past couple of, like, 2 months that I've been involved in this, I'm like, man, what happens if Olivier, like, you know, if he just decides to give up tomorrow morning? You know what I mean?
yeah, that's
It could
definitely
be
a problem.
catastrophic for us.
Yeah, maybe we could have more like training so that other people could kind of learn stuff that
It's a
Olivier
thought.
does.
Anything else on the install process or how we get there, right, with the users? I went to the mesh room and they didn't have any like flyers. I don't know how much you guys have done that. I just emailed the PDFs to people. Like, by the way, here's the new member guide.
Yeah, there should be some brochures, but I'm not sure what the state of the inventory is. They're usually kind of by the computers on the side
Yeah.
of them.
Okay.
And like another thing I thought of, we also have the install tip. So like if you do an install, you get $50 from the person you're installing for. So you can then use that to go buy equipment.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that adds up pretty quickly.
Or to
'cause I
take
think
an
you only
Uber
really
back
need,
like I did,
$200
because
of
I
equipment.
didn't want to carry all that shit on the train again. Okay. So this is what I've got. I'm going to sort of try to think through. Again, there's a bunch of stuff on here that I put for improvements, but again, there's a lot of overlap. And I think even just finding 2 or 3 things that we could do in a couple of months, right? Because again, I don't want to change up a lot of processes quickly is just going to cause more confusion. I think there's already a couple different steps that got to get done here. But for those of you that are new to the install process, I would love your feedback for anything else, or those of you that have been doing it a while. So please let me know.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
Is it possible to put together like install kits, something like that, for the stuff that's not as bulky?
That
So
is-
it makes it a little easier, and then they can just like, right?
There was a Slack thread about it, I remember. I love that idea. I think something that is just like, all right, I need to do like a typical install kind of uses the same stuff, and I just show up and grab it, you know? I mean, even like, do people know to ping you or Marco to come and even get it? Because I know I do sometimes, but
I'm still learning. I've done a couple of installs
Yeah.
along with Marco. I'm still learning, but it just looks like something that make it a little easier. Because like somebody like me, I can see me going back and forth. Like, oh, I forgot
right,
this. I forgot
right,
this.
right. I forgot to bring
Yeah.
a mask to somebody the other day, and I kind of jury-rigged it. It worked out, I hope. We'll see if he calls back.
Yeah. Sorry. No, especially when the smaller stuff is taken care of. I think it's just less to think about.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I did the same thing. I'm like I racked my, oh God, who did? And then what I end up doing is I've got 2 big tool bags full of crap that I'm not ever going to use. So,
Yeah.
okay. Anybody else? Okay, I think that's what we've got formally. I don't know when the pizza's going to be here, but I did bring some Narragansetts there if anybody's thirsty. Brian, anything else you want to talk about, or?
Yeah, there's a mistake in the pizza roll. So maybe another half hour before the pizza gets here.
Okay.
We've got 2 small pieces to start with.
Everybody gets one slice. Everybody gets half a slice. You can lick the top, and I'll lick the bottom.
You want to take it out?
And I apologize, it was PowerPoint. It's what I'm good at. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely.
That's good.
People, I'm getting dirty looks because I'm not using Google.
No.
So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.